Stygian Stilettos Gamer presents Intro to Blazor with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Catch new videos every week on Final Fantasy Fridays. Our goal in this tutorial series is a fun, stylish Final Fantasy VII Remake fan site. The software I'm using in this video is called Notepad++. I found it many years of programming. It's come in handy from time to time. Go to the website on your screen and it is absolutely free, no strings attached. You can download it, it only takes a few minutes. In this video, Strife Sensei and I will answer the question, what is a class? When building any website or application using an OOP language, classes are the #1 building block. We will define object-oriented programming as well as its core principles and other unfamiliar terminology briefly mentioned later in this tutorial series. However, before we get into the definitional side of things, let's first understand what an object even is, and that starts with understanding classes. Classes allow you to group related attributes and actions in a single place, and objects are built from those class definitions. Think about it from the game's perspective. Let's say we had a class named Character, and we want to define what it means to be a character in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Every character shares the same attributes, name, age, gender. All of the characters perform the same actions such as walking, running, casting spells, and limit breaks. Now we aren't actually building a Final Fantasy game here. Any game as large as Final Fantasy VII has millions of potential classes associated with it. What information your class holds depends on what you need it for your set goal. Ours is a fan site. This is the fan site we will be creating during this entire tutorial series. Under characters, we would like to show a little bit of biographical information for each team member. So, what information do we want to show? Alright, Final Fantasy fam, let's get our feet wet and do a little exercise. Now, you won't understand all the terms I'm going to use as we're going along here, particularly if you are brand new to C# or maybe even Blazor and C#. So don't worry about that. All will be explained. All will be revealed in time. But what you want to focus on right now is that we're creating a class named Character. The reason we want to create a character class is because on our website, on our fan site that we're going to create, we want to put some biographical information for each of our main characters. First name, last name, things like that. So open up Notepad++ to get started and make sure to go to Language, C, and C#. The reason I recommend doing that is because as you're coding, you'll notice that there's some color coding happening here with the yellow and the green. Notepad++ will be able to understand what to highlight because it knows what you're coding in if you tell it. And this is for visual purposes. As far as readability, it makes it a lot quicker to read what you're doing and interpret what you've already done. As you go along with programming, especially if you keep the same color coding, it'll be immediate. You can look at a page and immediately know what you're looking at. So it's very helpful. I recommend that. Also, there's something called Intellisense. As you're typing, you'll notice a little menu come down. The menu is suggestions for you, and they can be very helpful, especially if you're a new coder. So definitely do that for me. And let's just get started. Let's jump in. Okay, let's get to coding. First thing we want to do is put our cursor here and hit enter. First properties we're going to add are for first and last name. Public string first name. You want to add a get set. This is what makes it a property as opposed to a field. Public string last name. Get set. So when this character class is used, we have our first name and our last name properties. If we were creating a new object based on this character class, we would then be able to either, let's say we wanted to create an object for Cloud, we can set the first name property to have the value of Cloud, and of course the last name would have the value of Strife. If we use that object we've created anywhere in the program, we can then pull that same information each time, so we don't have to re-add that information every time we want to use this information. Let's do another type of variable. We're going to do public int age. Okay. Int stands for integer. It's just a generic way to represent a numerical value. There are multiple types of variables that can, such as decimal and float, but this is a good place to start. And a general catch-all, basically, if you ask me, if you're not sure or you're not needing anything specific, I would just go with integer. Let's add one more. We're going to do public bool is playable. Another get set. In our context, which context is everything when we're creating a class, we want to be able to put information about the character. Well, this may include something like an is playable boolean, boolean. A boolean is essentially a true or false statement. Cloud Strife would be playable, so this value for is playable would be true. But for Red 13, it would be false, because in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, we cannot actually actively play with Red 13. We can control Cloud, we can control Tifa, we cannot control Red 13. You may want to use a boolean for things like this particular boolean as an example. Let's say we wanted to only show characters who are playable in the biography initially, or we wanted to separate them, playable characters at the top, non-playable characters at the bottom. Another way we could do this is only show certain information if a character is playable, such as limit break information. Well, of course, Red 13 has a limit break, but you can't set, you don't have multiple options for a limit break. He's automatically controlled. So you may want to know something like, what limit break does Cloud start on? What material loadout does he start on? What weapons does he start out on? These would be relevant to a player that would not be relevant necessarily involving Red 13. Now let's add an example method. This would be a very simple example that we can do. We're going to make a method that when this method is called, it will put the first name and the last name of the character together. Since this is a character class, whenever we create an object off of this, we should have some value for first name and last name. In the exceptions that we don't have a first name and last name, there are ways to get around that. But in this case, if it's Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, we're going to have that information. So we can do public string, because the value that we're getting back will be a string for first name, like, full name. We're going to say show full name. That's going to be the name of our method. All right. And this is going to be a one-liner. So we're going to return meaning what information, when you call this method, do you want to get back? If we weren't getting any information back, we would do a public void show full name. But in this case, we want to actually get information back. The information we want back is the full name. That full name would be a string, because first name and last name are strings. So return, and we can just do, if you put a $sign here, 2 quotation marks. Now, instead of, there have been multiple ways over the years to do this. Now, instead of more cumbersome methods, we can use curly brackets, 2 curly brackets, and then we can use the name of the variable directly. First name. You see, this is what we call Intellisense. At the bottom, first name is coming up because it recognizes it as a variable name. We're going to have the same happen with last name. If you hit tab, it will autofill that information in for you. So now whenever we call the method show full name, if it's a character object with Cloud's information in it, we will get back Cloud Strife every time we use this. And then you always want to be sure to put a semicolon at the end. There's very few exceptions to this rule. All right, and there we have it. We have first name, last name, age, and the Boolean is playable. And then we have a method that shows us the full name of the character in which this class is being used for. Remember, objects are created from classes. To break this down a little further, let's look at this first property. What we have here, where it says public, public is an access modifier. You have public, private, internal, sealed. It depends on whether you're talking about a class or a variable or a method. Depends on what type of access modifiers you have. But that essentially tells the code what code outside of this page, outside of this character class, should be able to read or modify the information inside of this character class. String is the variable type. There are many variable types. String is probably the most common, honestly, because string basically means literally a string of characters. It can be letters, numbers, symbols, anything. Then we have our get set accessors. This gives permissions for other parts of the code to either only read the information here or be able to modify the information here. So if this were Cloud's name, if Cloud was a value for first name, the other code would be able to get his name from the property first name, but theoretically we would also be able to change that first name if we wanted to. Classes, variables, fields, properties, methods, all of these have access modifiers. So you're going to see a lot of public, private, particularly those are the most common, public and private, spread throughout your application. So just get used to the idea of thinking in terms of what code needs to see the information here. What code needs to modify the information here, because if you can't see the information, you can't modify it, or at least directly. There are ways to directly, indirectly. It's all about making sure that there's no unnecessary access to the information or the code that you have in different places. All right, we're going to stop it right there. Just giving you a little tasty taste. Wanted to make sure you had a chance to actually create a class. Remember, our goal is a fan site. That's the reason we're creating a class name character so that we can add information about each character on the website. And our next video will be about objects. Objects are created from classes. So we will talk about objects, what can be an object, the uses of objects in object-oriented programming. That will be all on the next video, and I hope to see you there. This is Stygian Stilettos Gamer, and I am # out of here, honey.